Hello and welcome to the Sally Tomato online classroom. I'm Kate and I'll be your instructor today for creating a purse and tote organizer. We are going to be making stuff-ins, a dimensional insert that's going to help you find everything that you need in your bag. The pattern got its name Stuff-Ins for all the stuff that you can stuff into its pockets and clip to its grommets and gate ring. And you can quickly pull your stuff-in out of one bag and stuff it into another without having to empty an entire bag. And as a connect to the Sally Tomato, the first two letters are capitalized. This project involves basic sewing. We'll be working with mesh, fold-over elastic, and installing grommets at the very end. The instructions detail making slip pockets, interior mesh pockets, assembling front, back, and side or base panels, and then attaching pockets, and finally assembling the stuff-in. Be sure to purchase the pattern before beginning your class. The pattern and the supplies can be purchased from our website or request them at your local quilt shop. We encourage you to shop local whenever you can. So I'm sure you're ready to get started on making stuff-ins. We'll go along step by step, so if you need to, be sure to pause the video so you can catch up because we want to sew this project together. So let's head over to the work table and get started. Before beginning, review the recommended fabrics on the back of your pattern cover and the pattern corrections page on our website for any updates. You'll need a main fabric, a lining fabric, mesh, and fold-over elastic for the project. You'll also need sew-in foam and heavy stabilizer to shape and support the organizer. 2 grommets and a gate ring are the pieces of hardware that we'll be installing, and they're available on our website. I also have a nice large mug to use for corner shaping. Then also take a minute to gather a few tools and notions listed on the back of your pattern. Cut out all the pieces listed in the pattern. When cutting out the mesh pockets, check that the stretch of the fabric is along the width of the pocket piece. Also refer to your pattern for the recommended seam allowances and stitch lengths for the piecing and top stitching. First, you'll make and attach the slip pockets. You can follow the pattern instructions or visit our YouTube channel for a video tutorial on how to assemble a slip pocket using the respective pattern pieces and measurements according to the Stuff-Ins pattern. After constructing your slip pocket, then you're going to position that slip pocket onto your main pattern piece. And then you'll pin or tape baste. That will help hold all your edges in place. And then we'll top stitch all the way around both sides and the bottom so that you have your slip pocket. Align the top raw long edge of the mesh piece D along the center of each elastic piece, or this would be piece F, and then you'll fold piece F over the mesh, and I'm going to start at one end and then I'll secure the other end with a pin or sewing clip. And then what I'm going to do is just stretch the elastic and the mesh so that they're somewhat even, and then I'll pin or clip in between, holding those stretched areas together. So just a matter of maneuvering, and then we'll be ready to head over to the sewing machine. And you could certainly add more clips or pins if you'd like. Top stitch piece F in place, stretching it as you sew to fit the width of piece D. You'll repeat these steps for the remaining mesh and elastic pieces. That would be mesh pieces E and elastic pieces G. I'm going to chain sew, and that's just stitching from one piece to the next. This technique is really helpful for feeding the elastic smoothly under the presser foot. With pocket piece D, we are ready to begin assembly of the front and back panels. With the right sides up of both the pocket and the lining, we are going to position the pocket so that the lower end overhangs on from the lining piece. So you'll have a little extra there, and then align the sides along both opposite edges, and then we're going to fold a little pleat. This isn't rocket science, so it doesn't have to be super precise, but I am folding a little pleat, just allowing for an extra seam allowance under there. So it's just a few little measurements, and again, refer to your pattern for this spacing right in here. But I'm just going to wonder clip that little pleat in place. I'm going to kind of estimate where the center is going to be, and I'm going to create a little pleat right at the center as well, keeping this bottom edge even. And here is where I will use a pin because it's quite far into my lining piece. So I'm just going to pin that in place. We aren't going to do anything with that right now, but we will. So let's get that last pleat. All right, you'll do the same for your second lining and second pocket, and we'll head over to the machine for a little basting. Baste the piece D sides in place. Mark and stitch a center line dividing the pocket and securing the center pleat. While we're at the machine, fold the pleat centered at the bottom edge of each pocket division. Then baste the bottom edge in place. You'll attach the remaining piece D to piece A in the same way. Next, with right sides together, align all the edges of one main to one lining fabric piece A, and then you'll pin together, and then you'll sew along all the edges with the seam allowance designated in your instructions, but leaving a 4 to 5 inch opening along the bottom edge. Once you have that sewn, then you'll angle trim each corner, being careful. You want to make sure you don't cut that stitching at the corner, and then we'll turn inside out through our turning opening. All right, as we're turning our pieces right side out, I'm going to show you just a little trick for pre-shaping the corner. If you fold the seam allowances at the corner, overlapping each other, and pinch with your thumb and forefinger and turn right side out, you will have almost the perfectly turned corner on the first try. I will go in and just do a little bit of an extra little push with my stiletto, or you could use a turning tool. So now you can turn that seam allowance at that opening to the wrong side, so right sides are together and aligning for a nice smooth straight edge, and then also press. You can either use your fingers or a seam roller. So let's fold our foam in about thirds, make a little roll, and then in your opening of your front or back panel, slide the foam inside and then unfold it. Make sure that foam goes all the way up to the top edge. So you want the foam right up to the edge. It's okay if there's not as much down at the lower edge. It's most important that it's all the way up to our top edge. So now we can go to the sewing machine and top stitch along our top edge of our panel. I've got the edge top stitched. I've also just used a wonder clip to hold the opening shut while we put these aside. And we're going to move on to shaping our lining pieces for the main and side panels. This should be piece B. So you could do one layer at a time or both layers at once. And I'm using a nice large mug for a gentle curve, aligning the mug along both edges at a corner, and then I'll simply trace around from edge to edge and do the same for the opposite corner, and we'll do the same for our lining. And while we're marking, I'm going to mark the side pieces of the foam. Only need to mark one end, so do not mark the opposite end. And as we assemble our stuff-in, you'll see exactly why we only want one end curved. All right, we'll trim all these curves and then I'll be right back. We are ready to add our mesh pockets to the lining of our side base. So I have already marked 2 lines that are equally spaced from the center. So this is our center, and I just marked a little bit, but here are the 2 solid lines that I've marked. I am going to use that as a guideline for my mesh pocket pieces. So I'm going to place the raw edge of the mesh pocket so that bottom edge that's opposite of the elastic is going to be aligned on that marked line. And I'm going to temporarily hold the pocket sides in place with Wonder Clips. This is not where the pocket will ultimately be placed, but we need to attach that bottom edge of the pocket. So I am just going to hold it in place real quickly. And then I'm going to fold, again, a pleat. You could do 1 large pleat, or if you prefer, you could do 2 smaller pleats. And I think I'll do that. That way that bulk is spread out a little bit, but you can certainly form your pleat as you wish. I'm going to pin this in place because I can't get a Wonder Clip in that area, making sure that my raw edges of the pocket are aligned along that marked line, and then I'm going to stitch seam, holding that permanently in place. And I'll do the same for the opposite pocket or the other side. Top stitch along the pleated raw edges of the mesh. If you use paper tape, it can be stitched through and easily torn away without damaging the stitching. Remove the sewing clips and fold the pockets at the stitching, covering the seam allowances. Align piece B and the pocket raw edges. Baste the sides and then top stitch the bottom of the pockets, encasing the seam allowances. Repeat the steps for attaching the remaining piece E pocket to the opposite end of lining piece B. Right now you should have both pockets attached to your lining, and we are going to then take our main fabric in piece B, that would be the side and base pieces, and we're going to align right sides together and then simply pin all the edges, and certainly again Wonder Clips, and then we'll sew, leaving an opening at the center. So again, you'll want to start stitching where you want the opening, go around your entire piece, coming around the curved edges, and then ending a good space, leaving a nice space open for turning. So let's get this pinned and sewn, and I'll see you right back at the work table. Once we have our entire piece sewn around, again leaving an opening open for turning, we're then going to trim or clip notches into the curved ends, and that will help keep the layers nice and smooth, and the allowance won't be quite as bulky when it's turned right side out. So simply cut notches in, not too close to the stitching. You do need to leave some fabric between the notch and the stitch seam. Here is our side and base panel turned right side out. You can see the pockets, my opening in the center, and we are ready to tuck in our foam side pieces. And this is a great chance to double check your curves. What you want is just to check that your foam curve is very close to your actual base piece curve. Because we use the same size cup, it creates a slightly different curve in the different widths of our main fabric and lining fabric piece and the foam. So if you need to, just trim off a little bit of the curved tip on your foam to fit a little more closely to your actual stitched side base piece. All right, so I did need to trim mine just a little bit. You can see it's a little flatter, and that's okay. That's why we did the double check. And now we're just going to slide the foam all the way up to the top end. So make sure it's fitting really close to this top edge. And then also it should not extend too much below your pocket edge. So this fits really well, and we're going to do the same with our other side piece. And just to make sure that foam doesn't slide out or down, I'm going to clip both ends because we have one more piece to add, and that is our heavy stabilizer. This is going to go in and stabilize the base, and then make sure the edges of your heavy stabilizer are equally spaced in between the two pocket seams. So you should have that as centered closely as possible. And that seems to be really well aligned. So we're going to, and this is where I like to fold the main fabric over my heavy stabilizer. Just helps keep that edge nice and clean and neat and much easier to stitch in the assembly process. And again, if you needed to press, you can use a little roller, pressing roller, or your fingers. And I'm just going to wonder clip these in place for the time being. And we are getting closer to finishing, but I do need to stitch two little seams here to hold our foam stabilizer in place as well as our heavy stabilizer. So let's head to the sewing machine. Top stitch next to the short ends of piece J. This is where a zipper foot is really nice, allowing you to stitch quite close to the stabilizer edge. We are really progressing here. Our next step is to mark on the lining side the center of your front and back pieces. Now on the front and back pieces, if your pocket division stitching is centered, you can use that as your center marking. Otherwise, do mark center along the bottom edge of both the front and the back pieces. And then on your side base piece, also on the lining, you'll need to mark center mark on both of the seamed edges. So you'll have two marks directly across from each other along the finished side edges of your base. And then we are going to, with right sides together, place our front over our base, aligning the center stitching here of our front pocket. And again, this is lining sides together, and we're going to pin, or I find it easier with all these layers to use Wonder Clips. The Wonder Clips work really well because this is some bulk here, but we've tried to keep all the stabilizer out of the stitching area so it should be okay. And then when we go to the machine, we are going to begin stitching near the center and then stitching towards a corner. So let's head over to the machine right now. Begin sewing from the center to the front corner. Pivot at the corner, aligning the front and side. Sew up to the top edge of the front, back stitching at the end. And you'll repeat for the remaining half of the front. We are almost finished. Our next step is to mark for a stitching line going right across from the top edge of your front to the top edge of the back, and that will be a stitching line. So you can mark using a ruler if you like, or just freehand a straight line going all the way across, just like I've done on this side. You can see I will top stitch then following exactly on that line. And then while I'm at the sewing machine, I'm going to top stitch around this curve, beginning and ending at my straight line of top stitching. And I already have my placement marked for a grommet. So be sure to check out youtube.com Sally Tomato for a video tutorial on how to install the grommets. And your S.T.uff-Ins organizer is ready to be put to use. Add essential key rings or key fobs to the gate ring. These become handy handles as you switch from one bag to the next. And feel free to be the designer. Add an extra mesh pocket to the exterior sides, or decide to switch and put a slip pocket on the interior. Maybe you'd prefer to have mesh pockets on the exterior. It's your choice. I'd like to show you how easy it is to put S.T.uff-Ins in and switch to different tote bags. First we have our Miranda bag. Now let's pretend we're in the mood for a commuter bag instead. Simply place the S.T.uff-Ins. I haven't emptied a thing yet. And then we can go directly to the Anna tote. Nice deep tote, so S.T.uff-Ins fits beautifully in that. And then maybe for crafting or picnic, Hudson works great as well. And then another possibility is the Molly bag. Certainly if you converted your Molly bag to a tote just by skipping the strap that closes in the center, you would have another great option for S.T.uff-Ins. Sometimes it's all the small little details that really make a difference, and I hope you've learned some new tips and techniques in our online class, but most of all, enjoy getting organized. If you enjoyed this mini pattern, join our monthly mini club for just $5 a month and receive a new mini pattern to your mailbox or inbox each month. These mini patterns are designed for all skill levels and are intended to be a quick sew project. Most patterns will include a video tutorial on our YouTube channel. We'd love to see how S.T.uff-Ins helps you organize. Share photos of your completed project using #SallyTomato and #StuffInPattern. And if you like this video tutorial, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe. I'm so glad you joined me for sewing S.T.uff-Ins. I feel like getting organized. Thanks for watching and have a great making day.